So our Summer Recruitment Institute that we have, this is the fourth year we've done it. The whole purpose of this is to provide a lot of basic training. We know that a lot of recruiters are onboarded at this time. And then a lot of you are with the program throughout the year, but you're kind of gearing up towards busy season. I know there's a few anomalies. There's some states that it's too hot in your state in the summer, so you actually have less work, but the majority of states have more work. So one of the things, the reason we have this as our first general session is agriculture continues to change, and we are in the business of trying to find people who work in agriculture. So it really behooves all of us to know what's happening in agriculture. And we have some tools at IDRC that we feel like are really important for states to use when they're trying to plan where they should go to find workers. And one of the things that I really love is the Ag Census. And so this morning we're going to give some insights of what's happening from the Ag Census reports and some H-2A changes that are really impact the H-2A program that I think are really important for us to know. And hopefully kind of start out with a focus on agriculture. So we have 3 days, today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. There are 3 sessions each day. The first general session will be general information for everybody, and then we do breakout sessions. We do record these as long as technology helps us in that. And each day at the end of the day, we provide we put those on our YouTube page. So feel free to, if you can't attend all, we totally understand people are busy. You can access those later, but we are trying to make sure that it's accessible as possible. So we'll pay attention to the chat box as we can. Melissa will give me a hand on that if I miss something, but do want to give a big welcome to everybody this morning. So the tool that I just dropped in the chat box a little bit ago, you can go ahead and check this out. And right now, a lot of it is on our IDRC states. I'm trying to remember, Melissa, did we do these for every state? This is, or right now it's just our...
It's just our states, but we will do the rest.
Okay. So if your state's not on here yet, then you're not an IDRC state, but we are going to add it in. So this summer, at some point, it'll be added in. So I'm going to pick on one of our states here. I think I've linked this in. Let me see. Maybe I haven't linked it in. So what this is these are the number of farm workers per state. And when you click on your state, if you're an IDRC state, you'll be able to see something that kind of shows the numbers. So let me go ahead and go to that link. Let me change out real quick and go to, so you can see it on our website. In this presentation, I'm going to go back and forth for a little bit. So if you go to our website and you're wondering where to find this, if you scroll down towards the bottom, there is something that says Consortium Member State Resources. And if you click on here, this is a tool that we worked on. Let me make sure it's big enough that you can see it. And I'm going to open up, let's open up Arizona. So what this does is let you know what your farm worker numbers used to be in 2017 and what they currently are in 2022. So the Ag Census is every 5 years. And so what we do for states is to be able to take a look at all your counties. So Arizona doesn't have a ton of counties. Some states have a whole bunch. And we have a color code based on the number of possible workers. So this would be their largest county of possible workers that were reported on the Ag Census. So these are field workers. These are workers that farmers say they hire. They're not all migrant workers, but a percentage of them should be. And so I'm going to highlight right now in a few slides of the decreases or increases that we have seen nationally for farm workers in general. So you can see in Arizona, for example, in 2017, there were 24,000 farm workers that were reported on the Ag Census. In 2022, there's only 21,000. So we unfortunately have seen a lot of decreases in some areas. And so this tool really will let you be able to see that. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that here in just a second. So let me go back to my slides. So one of the things that we really think is really important is that you are aware of ag in your area. You are aware of, the numbers of farm workers. You are aware of the type of crops that are coming. And so we'll share some tools throughout this week during the Recruiter Invitational that we'll be able to, or the Summer Recruitment Institute, that you'll be able to see how you can use those and what you can do with that. Here are some numbers. So if you can find your state, we will add this spreadsheet to the presentation so you'll be able to see. Unfortunately, in a lot of states, we've seen a decrease in the total number of workers. So you can see Alabama, for example, in 2022 has 24,000. In 2017, they had 26. So you can see the decrease. Arizona's down by 3,000. Arkansas is down by 885. California is down by 5,000. Colorado down by 4,000. Florida's up 341. Massachusetts is up 890. So we include this to show in the Ag Census that there has been a general decline in farm worker populations in many states. Kentucky took a big hit. They had 52,000 in 2017. Again, these reported farm workers that farmers on the Ag Census said, yes, I hire farm workers, I hire 25 or I hire 55. So the difference is Kentucky was one of the biggest hits, went from 52,000 to 40,000. I think Colorado had a decent hit, but right here was Kentucky definitely was one of the largest. Kansas was minus 4,000. So here's the next page. Michigan was down 8,000. But if you look at some of these numbers, Michigan had 77,000 possible workers there. Missouri had 50,000, they're down 9,000. Mississippi's down 5,000. Montana had 21,000, they're down to 20. So you can just kind of see your state. Texas went from 143,000 to 120. So these are just possible farm workers in your state. So let me make sure there's no comments. Okay. Ohio was down 7,000. So a bright spot was North Dakota was up 715, South Dakota up 570. My home state of Tennessee had 40,000 in 2017. They're down to 32. And then here was the last page. Vermont down 127. Washington State down 52,000. West Virginia down 1,000. Wisconsin 5,000. Wyoming 1,000 or 1,700. So you can kind of see this data shows kind of there's a lot of challenges in agriculture right now. And some of the things that we see on Ag Census are going to help you kind of understand that a little bit better. But there are some definite changes in the total number of possible workers in areas. So it's really important that states are really strategic and are looking at those areas where there are a lot of workers, and we're making sure that we're really streamlined in our recruitment efforts, because recruiting is not an easy thing. And it's, if you have a decrease, it's going to be even harder. So you want to make sure that you're really well prepared and you have those tools in your toolbox. So
You have a question.
says, do weather and crop and health have anything to do with these losses? So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about in general some of the challenges. And so of course, weather, right now we have, inflation. You've got a lot of changes that, people are paying a lot more things. This presentation will give some insight into the reasons why some of the, we have some of the changes, but definitely weather, crop, all of those kind of things can have challenges. But I think it's a big picture. There's a lot of things happening in US agriculture that are causing, we bring a lot more of our food in from other places than we used to. And we'll touch on on a lot of those things here in the presentation. Could you tell us if the percentage is the same for each state? I mean, you can look at them. They're not the same for each state just by looking at the numbers. You can see some states, you can do the math right there. Some states may have only lost, they had 60,000 workers and they went down only 596. And then you may look at like at a Kentucky that went down, 14, 15,000. So definitely not the same percentage change all over. Very different in each state, a lot of different factors. But this is just something for you to kind of look at. And Benjamin said yes, and the pandemic was still going on. And so this Ag Census covers, it's 5 year, it comes out every 5 years. So in 2022, when they were doing the census, of course, this was still very much in the pandemic. I don't know that things are, increasing a whole bunch since the pandemic. So I don't know that, I think the changes that happened during the pandemic, a lot of people knew there were different food systems. For example, the food either went to, restaurants or schools or directly to grocers, but there wasn't a way for some of the farms to pivot. If the restaurants didn't need their produce, it wasn't like they could immediately then sell it to Walmart or to a grocer. So there was a lot of decline during that time. But that definitely is something, something to really, really think about. Okay. So moving on to give you a little bit of insight, I should have had a poll question that would ask you how much of our country produces food, like how much of our population. Only 1% of our population farms, so are farmers. So it's a very small percentage. Compared to a lot of countries in the world, that's extremely, a lot of them, it's like 15%. We have very few farmers in this country. We all need to eat. So that's something we definitely want to think about of, where are we getting our food and what does it look like? So Forbes did a report kind of their summary of, and I've got in the presentation, there's always a link to the source of where this came from. And in some of their observations, I think they had like 10 or so observations that they put in there. It says US farmland area is down a bit, but is still a major land use category. So over the last 20 years, the area farmed has dropped from 938 million acres in 2002. Some of you were working in MigraNet at that time, to 880 million acres in 2022, including a 2.2% drop in the last 5 years. So the ag secretary basically said that farm productivity has really had a 3%, 3-time gain since 1948, to make sure that contraction of less farmland, they've been able to produce more. It says the loss of farm acres is partially a matter of urban and suburban development, but recently it also involves a large-scale installation of solar farms. So on these slides, you're going to notice that I have a lot of text. The text is so that if you want to take this somewhere and share this with your staff, that you have kind of where it came from and you didn't just have my Cliff Notes on it. And so I intentionally included a lot of information on the slides. So some of the reductions that they've seen have been in cropland, in pastureland, and in woodlands. So its farms still occupy an area that is comparable to 46% of the land area in the United States. So we may have a small percentage number of farmers, but 46% of the land is still used for farming. And in some places, it could be 90%. So some of you are in rural areas where, farming is the main industry that's going on. It looks very different. So like when you asked about the decrease, whether everyone had the same percentage decrease, agriculture is very diverse and it's very different state by state. And so the challenges faced by one state, for example, water issues in the West, maybe not having enough water, and another area has too much water. So it's very specific to each area, and then the crops that they're growing and the industry impacts that each crop has. And so sometimes I'll have people say, well, what does this have to do with MigraNet? If there's not agriculture, or let's say, for example, in the state that I worked in for a long time in Tennessee, we had a big, huge tobacco belt on the top part of the state. And over time, that got smaller and smaller and smaller. And so we had counties that were always tobacco counties. And then maybe 10 years later, they're not there anymore. Those farms are not existent. And so maybe they're going to another crop. Maybe they're, it becomes a suburb, or it gets developed. But that potential, that area that was for so many years, we had tobacco, really changed very quickly. And so there still is tobacco in the state, but it may have shifted 2 full counties over from where it was 10 years ago. And so that was something that was unique to the state that I was working with. But another state may be completely, it could be water rights issues. It could be that you've had major drought for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's really impacted the number of cows that you have, or the number of feedlots. So it's very unique. But there are a lot of indicators and a lot of things that you could pay attention for your area to know. But for us, if that decline happens, the number of farm workers is going to decline also. If a crop is not, if the value of the crop, I always share the story of, in Tennessee, for example, one year we were planning for a summer program and we had all our staff in place. We had the busing in place. We had everything ready. And the kids normally came July 4th weekend. And we usually did this super fast recruitment effort to try to get everybody into summer school the next week, and nobody came. And we're super concerned of what happened. And the crazy thing is the tomatoes were in the field and they were ready to be processed. They're ready to be picked. But what happened was the value of the tomato at the time, it was more expensive for them to have it harvest than what they would actually get the money for. So they just let them rot in the field. And that was the year that I realized I really need to pay way better attention to what's happening in ag and stop just assuming that the same people will come every year and that agriculture will be the same. And so I started paying a lot more attention to the trends. And we realized at the time that the Tennessee growers couldn't compete with the tomatoes that were coming in at the same time from Mexico. And the ones that were coming in from Mexico were cheaper. And so these guys just couldn't compete. And so that year, they basically was a bust. So if you have multiple years like that for farms, pretty soon your tomato industry in your area is gone. And so it's not just, trying to figure out where families came the year before, it's paying attention to what's actually happening in your state. So it says in here the decline in 2022, the United States had over 1.9 million farms, which was down 6.9% from 2017. These farms accounted for 880 million acres, or 39% of all US land. And that was a decline from the 2017 level. So you can kind of see here, this is the trends. This is a direct slide from USDA. And you can kind of see the number of farms and how it, 2002, you can kind of see it went up. 2007 went down a little bit, down a little bit, down a little bit. And you can see the land and farms has also gone down. You can see the percentage right here. You've got a big, huge farm belt right there going through the middle of the country. If this particular area has tons of drought for the next 3-4 years, this will impact a lot of things. So the weather changes are definitely a reality that we're seeing. And you see that, so many things. I'm going to look in the chat box and see if I missed anything. It says from South Carolina, that happened here in South Carolina a few years ago. So sad because it was a great crop. It was yummy and beautiful and fruitful, but not as cheap as the import. Yeah, definitely happens. That happens all over the place. Maybe here's another thing that's been kind of a challenge for some farms lately. Your growing season has changed. Maybe you used to always market your blueberries in July, and now they're coming in June, and the market is not as good in June as it was in July. And so there's just a lot of things that you and I would not normally think about. We go to the grocery store and there's the food, and we don't really worry about the challenges, but there are a myriad of challenges that farms are facing right now. So here's a little bit of the differences of farms by land of size. It says in the 2022, the largest 2% of US farms, so they have 5,000 acres or more, controlled 42% of all farmland. So we have a lot of big farms. Conversely, 42% of farms had less than 50 acres and controlled 2% of all the farmland. In 2002, the largest farms controlled 35% of all farmland. So if we're trying to find families, we want to know, where are those large farms? Where are they at? Where are they working? How can we possibly work with them? Approximately 9 out of 10 acres of agricultural land were either permanent pasture or cropland. Woodland was 8%, and the remaining 4% were buildings, livestock facilities, things like that. So here are where the farms are by location. It says counties with high concentration of farms. You can kind of see we've got, certain areas that you've got these, 1,500 or more. You can see just kind of the areas we have. Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri had the largest declines in farm numbers from 2017 to 2022, while New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, and Arkansas had the largest percentage declines. So Texas has a lot of areas with high concentration of farms in eastern Texas. And says with nearly 231,000 farms, Texas had more than twice as many farms as the next state. So here's your top states as far as the number of farms. Texas is, Missouri's coming in right here, but Texas is way bigger than Iowa, Ohio, Illinois, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Minnesota, California, and Tennessee. Now you can see California has only, compared to Texas, California has a lot of those very, very large farms too. And so you can see the percentage of the, how that's all set up. Let me check the chat box and make sure. So US production by state. This was the number of ag sales. The top 10 states accounted for 55% of sales. As in 2017, California was the largest provider of agricultural products. So you can see this last one could be a little misleading. You could think, oh, okay, Missouri is going to have more than California. No, it just depends. You got to look at all the different numbers and see how they kind of play together. So the top 9 US counties of where this is an interesting fact. So some of you maybe, I don't know if anybody is from Fresno County in California. So Fresno County has larger agriculture sales than 23 individual states. So it can show the magnitude of, that one county can compare against 23. It has more than 23 other states. So of course, California is a leader. Then we have Iowa, Texas, Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois, Kansas, North Carolina, Indiana, and Wisconsin coming in after that. Top commodities, cattle and calves was the top ranked commodity of US ag. Texas was the top state in cattle and calves. So in some states, cattle is really not going to bring very many workers in. But if you're in these states that have very large numbers of cows, there's going to be feedlots. There's going to be a lot more workers that are working with that. So the top five commodities accounted for 363 billion in sales, 67% of US total ag sales, cattle and calves being first, then corn, then poultry and eggs, then soybeans, and then milk. So soy usually doesn't have a lot of, it's pretty mechanized, not a lot of workers for that. Top states for cattle and calves was Texas, top state for corn, Iowa, top state for poultry and eggs was North Carolina, Illinois for soybean, and California for milk or dairy. So 3/4 of the farmland was used by farms in two commodity categories, which is oil seed and grain production, 32% and 41% in cattle and dairy. So oil seeds and grains usually are not very, there's not a lot of workers that specifically come from that. Although there is an interesting group that goes across Nebraska and Oklahoma and Kansas to help a lot of those wheat producers. You know, they have like specialty processors, and so there is some movement for those types of things. So you can look at the number of farmland, number of farms, and there are a lot of farms that are specializing in cattle and dairy. You can kind of see that. So total farm revenue. So this is, we talked about some of the challenges of why numbers come and go, you know, why there might be increase or decrease. We do know that there's been a lot more what they call the farm inputs, the things, the expenditures that they have to have. It says in 2022, the U.S. farming sector had a total production value of 543.1 billion, and 78.3 was from farms with at least 1 million in sales. So those are a little bit larger farms. The value of ag production continued to be almost split between livestock and crops, but there's some challenges here. So if you look at, you know, the expenditures, feed. So if any time feed becomes really expensive, that directly inputs, you know, affects how, you know, the cost of farming for farms. I know that fertilizer has been super high. So you've got here, feed is, you know, the percentage, one of their highest costs. Farm services, 11%. Livestock and poultry, labor at 9%, rent at 8%, 7% for fertilizer, seeds and plants. So they have a lot of different things that they're looking at that, you know, affect whether a farm is profitable or not. Still says that U.S. farms are mostly family businesses. It says one common false narrative about U.S. agriculture is that the consolidation has occurred in the industry, means that there's a shift from family farms to corporate ag. So it says here 94.7% of U.S. farms in the census were family operated, and those comprised 84% of U.S. farmland. So, you know, that it says here the risk reward model profit or profile of farming is not a good fit with corporate business models. So there's a lot of risk, a lot of different changes, a lot of things that can input whether people really affect whether people are successful or not. And then overall, we've had farmers getting older and older, and the average right now in 2022 in the census was at the age of 58.1. But it said that rate was actually a little bit slower than previous. They thought it would be a little bit higher, but we do have some other things. We have some younger, older farmers joining in, and we have some younger producers also joining in, which are impacting the age, which is a good thing, because at one point they were really thinking that, you know, what's going to happen if all of these farmers age out and they're no longer, you know, their children are not interested in farming, or their land becomes available for, you know, for other uses. What's going to happen with that? And so that's been kind of an interesting thing to look at. Let me check the chat box. Okay. Says the average age of all U.S. farm producers in 2022 is 58.1, it's about a half a year from 2017, continuing the long-term trend of aging in the U.S. producer populations. Producers also tend to be experienced. They usually have been farming an average of 23.4 years. So farming is an extremely hard thing to just, let's say I have a 17-year-old and I have a 19-year-old. If either one of them wanted to start farming, the cost of land, the cost of the equipment that they need, you know, the fertilizer, all of those different kind of things, or maybe it's for livestock, is expensive. And so it's a really hard thing for someone to just be like, unless they have someone helping them, or they're inheriting something, or they're, you know, their family farms, it's a hard business to just suddenly go ahead and start. So we have a lot of really small scale farmers kind of starting, but it's super hard to start, you know, just to kind of walk in. So you can see on average, producers are older in southern states and younger in Midwestern states. So something kind of to not a lot of difference as far as, between 56 and 60. So it's not like there's a bunch of 45-year-olds out there. So it's interesting to see how that kind of plays out. So here are the distribution. Those that were under 25 years old between 2017 and 2022, you see that it went down a little bit. Those that stayed the same, 25 to 34 years old, about 7%, 35 to 44. So there's a little bit more in this age bracket than there was before. Sorry, I've got too many phones. Let me turn that down. And then you see from 45 to 54 years, you've got 15 to 18. So we've got less in that age bracket than there was before. So you can kind of see how this kind of plays out throughout. We did have 28% of 60 between 55 to 64. So this has gone down, and you can kind of see that this has gone up a little bit. And 75 years and older, we still have 14% right now that are 75 years and older that are still farming. So interesting numbers there. Something they find encouraging is there has been an increase in the younger farmers, and they've seen a lot of increases in row crops in Midwestern states. And they've had more programs kind of on national and state level programs to try to encourage, new farmers to be able to do more. There's a lot of interest in precision agriculture. I've done some work with the National Ag Employers Coalition, and one interesting thing is they're finding a lot of not having enough workers, but there's not a lot of outreach to high school students that are, 11th, 12th grade trying to figure out what they want to do. And so there's kind of a disconnect between industries that are really needing workers and the chance to really let future workers know of those industries and be able to get the training for that. So farm characteristics, you can kind of see it by, male and female. There's definitely a lot more male than young producers. A lot of producers that have 10 years are farming less on these young producer snapshots. Not huge incomes. You can kind of see the amount of money that they're making. So a lot of them are still lower. 70% of young producers had only one producer on the farm versus 40% of all others. So a lot of them are going to be doing multiple things. We're still seeing a lot of the farmland is being rented. 31% of the farmland was rented to farmers who also own their land. 9% was rented to tenant farmers who didn't own land. Farmers that fully own their land only accounted for 35% of the total. So if you think about that and why numbers may come and go, if you're not making if your farm is not able to produce good and you're paying the rent and you're paying, you don't own your farm outright, that's another reason that there could be a real, tension, real challenge on trying to, make it. It says ag land prices have been raising rapidly. And if farmers take on substantial mortgage debt, they are at risk of the event of a year with bad weather or a cycle of low commodity prices. To give you an example, where I live in Tennessee, farmland probably, 4 or 5 years ago, you could probably get for about $2,000 an acre, just rural. Now it's $10,000 an acre or more, 10, 12,000 acre. And that's just in a very short amount of time, the difference on that. It says what will be increasingly important is the lease arrangements that give farmers an incentive to make the investment needed to employ climate smart and regenerative farming practices. But again, those are kind of things that may be seen as kind of luxury things if you're trying to just make, break even with what you have. We have a comment. K-State is organizing an internship program in farm activities for high school students. They receive a stipend and a scholarship for agriculture careers in K-State. We are seeing more of those types of things that are available. And so that's a good example of something, that a state's doing right there. Thanks for sharing that. So here's how kind of the breakdown of just 35% of their full owners. Some of them are part owners, some are rented land, some are tenants, and that they're, they may not own any land. So again, this definitely impacts. So I want to talk a little bit about H2A. So I know not everybody, not all, H2A qualify. Of course, they have to follow within our, our age brackets that we have. But we're definitely seeing a lot more H2A positions being requested and certified. So you can kind of see here, this was 2021, 2022. You see the increases in just 1 year. this is in thousands, the positions that are going up. So these are some of the top 10: Florida, California, Georgia, Washington, North Carolina, Michigan, Louisiana, Arizona, Texas, New York, and then all other states. So you can continue, you can see this increase. This is still a small percentage of the total farm worker population as a whole, but it's becoming larger and larger as you see. So the blue is jobs and the orange is visas. So they may request jobs, they may request visa, but that does not mean that they're all certified or filled. So you can see, here are the different, it says in FY 2021, the Department of Labor certified over 317,000 seasonal jobs, up 15% from the year before, and more than 3 times from 2013. So you can see here, continued increase, job certified, visas issued. So they may have said you could have these, but then the actual visas that they got were less. So 5 states account for 51% of the H-2A certified jobs in fiscal year. So if you are in these states and you are not, really looking at H-2A, you're definitely probably missing some workers. And so you can kind of see these ones here in brown, they've got the largest, more than 25,000. The orange between 10,000 and 25,000, lighter blue 5,000 to 10,000, and then the darkest blue under 5,000. So a relatively small number of employers sponsored the majority of H-2A workers. That is one thing that IDRC is trying to work to see if we can partner with some of the agencies that help farms be able to get more workers. One of them is Moss Labor. We actually were able to meet with some of their staff and talk with them, and we're hoping to kind of be able to get into these places that help farmers get workers so that we can get the information about MigrantEd out to the farmers, and so it'll hopefully be a little bit easier for you guys to work with them. So you can see here, H-2A employers, number of H-2A workers certified per employer. So you can kind of see how this works. That 39.4 having 500 or more, you can kind of see the difference on that. Hiring, now this is something that has kind of changed, is hiring of H-2A workers has increased for farm labor contractors and individual employers since 2012. We've seen a lot more farm labor contractors bring in H-2A, which means they may be in North Carolina for part of the year and then in South Carolina for another part of the year. So interesting that that's a different dynamic when you have a farm labor contractor as compared to a farm owner. And here are the positions per state. You can kind of see Florida had 51,000. This is 2023. You can see 40,000 in California, 35 in Washington. These are big numbers. These are, for some of your states, it's still maybe only, 685 or lower, but some of you are seeing just huge increases, which is a different way that you have to recruit, different way you're working with people. It says, can you assist on H-2A agriculture clearance order? How does this information work? Francis, if you'll clarify your question a little bit more so I can understand what you're asking, then maybe I can make sure. So certified, sometimes people request a certain number of workers, but then they only are able to get visas for a smaller number. So that may be, like these are certified positions. So these are the positions that we're able to say, yes, you can get visas for. So here's a change in the positions, the difference. New Jersey went down, Maryland went down, but pretty much everybody else was up. So you can kind of see the difference between year to year. Here are the percentage change of the increase. So there's a comment, I have 3 families that work on H-2A visa at the feed yards. Yeah, there's some different types of visas. There's some visas that, like the TN visa, that may be more of a permanent visa, but the H-2A, there are a lot of different ways that people are able to get H-2A workers, and we are seeing them in all different types of industries. So this is a percentage change from 2022 to 2023. Now, this is one of the challenges of why some farms are kind of screaming right now. So this is the required wage that H-2A farmers are required to pay their workers. And it's supposed to be a wage so that it doesn't penalize any other local worker from getting less. It's supposed to be a comparable wage, but the Department of Labor sets this. And so an H-2A worker in Florida may cost for basic harvesting, position, $14.77. And that same type of position in Washington is going to cost $19.25, or in California, it's going to cost $19.75. So this is a real challenge for farmers. If they couldn't find enough workers, and now they're bringing in workers that they're, paying for the housing and their transportation there, and they're guaranteeing a wage at a certain time. These figures can change. One year they can be required to pay $14.77 per year, and the next year they could be $15.77. So it just depends on all of these different dynamics. So this is the dollar per hour increase in 2024 compared to 2023. So in Washington state, the farmers were required per hour to pay $1.28 more for their basic certified positions. In some states, it may be just 70 cents in New Mexico. It may be 44% here. It may be $1 more in Georgia. So these are big. You imagine if you have a business and you have every single one of your employees has an increase of $1.28. That's going to really impact your overall, how much money you make through that at the end of this. And so there's a lot of things going on right now that are really challenging. And one is, of course, this is supposed to be for a fair wage and a lot of different things, but you've got a lot of farms saying there's so much things that are out of their control. The fertilizer costs more, the feed costs more, the worker costs more. And so that is also a challenge as far as, competitiveness and what they're able to do. So there is some new changes that I wanted to make sure. Let's see. Yes. So Olivia, yes, that's she just sent, there are different groups that help. I'm just going to pull this one up that she just shared. So there are a ton of these companies that help H-2A labor. They help farmers get H-2A labor. And so this particular group here, they're saying, they help with visas, they help you connect things for housing, they've got human resources. So there are a lot of different groups that your program may need to work with that in the past you weren't even thinking about. You're thinking about just the farmers, but you have organizations that now help with labor. There's always been temporary agencies, but these are larger groups that help. If I've got a new farm and the farm is saying, I don't know how to get started with H-2A, then these guys help them, figure out the paperwork and do everything. So there were some new rules that just came out for H-2A. I feel like for a long time that H-2A was seen as the kind of golden, child of, hey, this is how we'll fix the shortage that we have in labor and in farm ag labor. But there's some new challenges that some new rules that were added that I think a lot of farms are really having a hard time with. And this is very, very recent. So there was a news release here. If you want to read it, you can, in the slides, it'll take it directly to this particular one. And I want to share both sides of the story here. So it says, the Department of Labor announced its final rule to strengthen protections for farm workers. The rule targets vulnerability and abuses experienced by workers on the H-2A program that undermine fair labor standards for all workers. It says the H-2A program allows employers to hire foreign workers when the department determines there's a lack of able, willing, and qualified U.S. workers. So we know this, but it says here, workers frequently face abuse, working conditions that undercut all farm workers in the U.S. So the Department of Labor came up with some new protections that are now applicable to all H-2A. So all H-2A after August, I believe. So one of them is the workers now have protections for what they call worker self-advocacy. So some of these things may seem really positive for the workers. Some of them may wind up having a whole kind of negative side. We'll just have to see how this plays out. It says the final rule improves workers' ability to engage in advocacy regarding their working conditions by expanding the range of activities protected by anti-retaliation provisions. So for workers not protected by the National Labor Relations Act, which are a lot of our farm workers, this rule protects workers' choice to engage in self-organization or concerted activities and decline attending employer-sponsored captive audience meetings where employers discourage workers from joining unions. So this is opening the door for more chance for workers to join unions. So the rule also allows workers to consult key service providers, such as legal service providers, to meet with them in employer-furnished housing, and they may now accept and invite guests, including labor organizations, service providers, and others to their employer-furnished housing. So for the worker, this could be a really good thing. It could be a chance that they can, if they want to join something, they could. for the worker, it could also not be a good thing because the farms, for example, are super concerned about unions. This is like from the South, for example, there's not been a lot of farm worker union activity in a lot of places. Some states, this has been, something that's going on for years and years. Regardless of whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, a lot of farms are super concerned about the idea that the union could come and talk to their workers in their farm worker housing and organize right there on their on their land. What does that mean for us? If you show up without talking to the farm owner or the contractor or the lead, and just be like, hey, I want to talk to workers, they may think that your purposes are for other purposes than what you're doing. So in my mind, this all of the farm, IDRC participates in some of the farm association meetings. They are super concerned. And so if someone comes in and so they say, hey, if somebody's on my property that I don't know who it is, I'm going to get them out just as quick as possible before they get a chance to talk to the workers. So it's up to us to go and make sure we have those relationships with the farms. On the opposite side, I presented to a group that they said we really should be more involved with migrant ed, because then it will show our workers that we're interested in bringing new things to them. It's not just the union that would bring resources, that we're willing to bring resources in the community and do this. So it's kind of an interesting thing that they're now allowed to have people come to the housing, which is a good thing. But at the same time, it's going to be in some areas, workers are brand new and they don't even know anything about a union. They don't even know what this is or what it's about. It says here, another change is the idea of a for-cause termination. Workers employed under the H-2A program have the right for payment for 3/4 of the hours offered in their work contract, as well as housing and meals until the worker leaves. They also are allowed to have the outbound transportation if the worker is a U.S. worker, and they have the chance to be contacted for employment the next year, unless they're terminated for cause. So this new rule that they have clarifies that an employer can only terminate a worker for cause when the worker either fails to comply with their policies or fails to perform job duties satisfactorily after, in most cases, the transparent application of a system of progressive discipline. So this is new. The farmers haven't had someone tell them what progressive discipline looks like, what that means. It says the rule establishes that for a worker to be terminated for cause, 5 conditions must be met, including a requirement that workers are either informed about or reasonably should have known the policy, rule, or performance expectation unless the worker is engaged in egregious misconduct. So what does that mean? It just means now that farmers have to be able to show, in order for this for-cause termination, they've got to be able to show they met those 5 conditions. And so another change is they want to make sure that anyone that's involved in the recruitment process, they has to be more transparent because they've had a lot of abuses and different things. This rule imposes new disclosure requirements to improve foreign worker recruitment chain transparency. So if I'm getting my workers from Sinaloa, Mexico, I've got to be able to show every single person that works along this chain for me to be able to find those workers. So they want to be able to protect and make sure that somebody's not charging money on this. It says the new provisions require employers to provide a copy of all agreements with any agent, recruiter they engage or plan to engage, disclose the name and location of any person or entity working with a recruiter who will solicit prospective H-2A workers, and they disclose the application, the location, the contact, and how they worked with them. So it says here, let me look at what your questions that you have.
You probably want to look at the one from Angela.
Okay. So question is, does IDRC have statistics on the average age of H-2A workers? Is there information regarding the numbers of H-2A workers who travel with their children? So those kind of things are not super disclosed, and it is different per industry and per area. The people that have those would be like what Olivia mentioned for the WAFLA or for the mass labor. That is something we're trying to see if we can get more information to work to kind of understand the populations. But for example, sometimes we've had growers say we're really looking for 35 to 45-year-olds because they have families and they're more committed to the work. We have other ones, depending on the crop of what they're doing, they want somebody younger because it's easier for them with their backs to do the work. It really just depends. So every single one is a little bit different, but nationally, they don't put that information out as far as their age. Says in terms of allocation formula, do OSY seasonal H-2A workers who receive minimal education services from Title I Part C a small period of time count the same as migratory children in the K-12 system who receive consistent quality educational services year-round? So it depends on how your state formula is set up, but in your summer services, if you're counting services, you're usually looking, services are counted the same. You're looking at the types of, as long as it meets the requirements. I know OME in one of their presentations that they have on the results, one talks about that in the summer they have to have a minimum of a full day of service. And so the funding formula is showing, who was served in the summer. And if the OSY had the minimum, had that requirement the same as a K-12, they're gonna still, count in that formula pretty similar. So I would suggest you reach out to your state and see how that funding formula is set up. Okay. Next one, delay of wage. So this is something that they now have. These protections were not in place, these requirements. And like I said, there are very mixed feelings on this. And so for a lot of farmers, these changes are seen as a real burden in the flexibility of this program and their interest in using the program. So it'll be interesting how this impacts. It says ensuring timely wage changes for H-2A workers, which helps prevent an adverse effect on the wages of similarly employed workers. Remember, I said that they changed that and they may say, all right, Washington H-2A workers, now it's 1975. Next year, it could be 2020. It says this change safeguards the fair compensation for workers under the H-2A program and addresses potential adverse effects on wages and working conditions of similarly employed workers in the U.S. The rule would also require employers who fail to provide adequate notice to workers of a delay in their start date to pay workers the applicable rate for each day that work is delayed up for 14 days. So this has happened in some places because they're required to, make those, that maybe they told them that the work was going to start October 1st, but it really starts on October 20th. They're saying, well, they could be liable to pay for that full time up till their start date. Now seatbelts are required. This is something that I have an article that I'm going to share. Some of you probably heard about the workers that passed away recently in Florida that were H-2A workers. This is improving the transportation safety. Many H-2A workers travel in vans or buses, sometimes driven after long days by tired workers. The final rule includes a seatbelt requirement to reduce the hazards associated with transportation of farm workers. If a vehicle is required by Department of Transportation regulations to be manufactured with seatbelts, the final rule prohibits the operation of these vehicles to transport workers unless each occupant is wearing a seatbelt. So this was just happened, I believe, like last week or the week before. There were 8 workers that were killed and 40 others that were hurt on a crash. And so it was not the farm owners, it was basically the person who crashed into him was intoxicated. And so definitely these kind of things, real challenges. So the H-2A program allows U.S. employers or agents. Okay, so it says federal statistics show vehicle crashes were the leading cause of job-related deaths among farm workers in 2022. The latest year available, they accounted for 81 of the 171 fatalities. And so something that is now addressed by that. So do you have a list of employee law agencies that help H-2As with the new farm worker protection rule? So this is not, these are every farm has to employ, Department of Labor is the one that enforces these. So it's just Department of Labor, you would reach out. So another thing that I think is a real positive change too is that they can't, so in some cases we've seen this with workers. When workers first come, the farm would take their passport and be like, well, you don't need it until October. It is April and we'll give it back to you. They are now not allowed to confiscate their passport, visa, or other identification of documents at all because it's considered a tactic to exploit workers. Says ensuring employer accountability. The final rule updates procedures for discontinuing employment services for employers that have failed to meet the Department of Labor's requirements. Relatedly, the rule requires states to discontinue services to debarred employers. So if I'm a farm that has violation on that I can't have like now my son take over the farm and do this. It says it streamlines the procedures for applying debarment to a successor who carries forward a debarred company. In addition, In addition, the rule codifies how the department determines whether separate entities are acting as one employer for purposes of assessing seasonal or temporary need, and how these entities are created for enforcement purposes. So the final rule is effective on June 28th, 2024. So this will, however, H2A applications filed before August 28th, 2024 will be processed according to the rules that were in effect before that. Any applications after the 29th of August will be processed with the new rules. So there'll be a little bit of window between both of those things. So there's a lot of concern. So the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives, for example, says the U.S. Department of Labor seems determined to grant an enormous number of new worker rights for farm workers out there. These rights are important, but yet at the same time, they really can't come at the expense of the freedom and oversight of our farms. Pitting individual farms out there against union organizers and basically anybody else that farm workers would like to bring on our farms and ranchers to oversee these farms' operation is not the direction that we would like to be going. Our farmers do not need any burden placed upon them in these kind of times. So there are a lot of challenges that farmers are facing, and so some of them see this as extremely negative. And some, could say, okay, there have been a lot of abuses in certain things, but they're saying, well, all of us shouldn't be impacted by the abuses of others. So I just think the important thing for us is to be aware of these, to know of these things for workers. If we see things that, that workers should be aware of. One of the things that IDRC has tried to do is talk to the associations to say, look, we can kind of share information with workers, on both sides of the aisle. We can be neutral and be able to bring resources. And so there's been some interest in that. And so we're trying to find more national partners that we can work with. There's some people that knew that these rules were going to happen that have been really mad about why this is happening. And they think that it just adds extra regulations, extra challenges. And so I think what they thought was like, hey, this H2A is the way. I think there's a lot of challenges right now with these new changes that farms may say, I may want to go back to workers, really try to, have workers from here instead of bringing workers from other places. So a lot of things happening. We had some questions recently about this. I'm going to share a video real quick. Let's see if I can get it. This is kind of changing a little bit of,
instantly cleans toilets
I
without
gotta
any scrubbing. Take
share
any
it here in
dirty
just a
toilet,
second,
pour it
as soon
into
as this
a
ad
and watch
stops.
the foam expand to cover the
Um,
entire bowl. Let it sit for about 30 minutes.
It's like a
then
toilet
flush it
ad, so let
away
me
and wash your
share
toilets
this.
politely.
Let me
Its
go ahead and
patented
open
nanonet
this.
technology
Waiting for this
even
to end.
dissolves unsightly rust, calcium, and limescale.
Okay.
Hi, y'all. My name's Tammy.
So I want to preface this a little bit before I share this. So we've had some questions lately about this is an immigration thing related to parole in place. I know I'm shifting gears here for a second, and I wanted to share this because we've had some questions, and I think this is something interesting that you guys might be interested in knowing about. So let me share this.
Hi, y'all. My name's Tammy Lynn. I'm an immigration attorney out of San Diego, California. There's been a lot of talk about a possible new plan that would help the undocumented husbands and wives of U.S. citizens remain safely in the U.S. and receive a work permit. Just to be clear, no new program has been announced, but the idea is known as paroled in place. Sometimes you'll hear it as PIP, PIP, and it's been used before for military service members and their families. A parole in place program means that if the undocumented spouse qualifies, they could get work authorization and protection from deportation. The first thing to remember is that there is no new policy that's been announced. No one can be certain if the program will happen or when it will happen. Please do not trust anyone who says they can help you apply for a new parole in place program. There is no policy yet. Please speak with a qualified immigration attorney if you wish to seek guidance about your situation and whether the program might apply to you and your family. The reason the program for the undocumented husbands and wives of U.S. citizens is being discussed is because immigrants who marry a U.S. citizen are not automatically on a path to citizenship. It surprises a lot of people to learn that no one is given a green card automatically just because they're married to a citizen. If the Biden administration makes the decision to use parole in place in this way, it could allow eligible spouses of U.S. citizens who do not have legal status to apply for something called parole. Essentially, they'd be granted protection from deportation and hopefully be able to work with an attorney to find a path to more permanent status. If a new program is announced, not everyone who's married to a U.S. citizen would be eligible. There's various reasons. Someone could be something called inadmissible. So please speak to a qualified immigration attorney if you have questions. And to be clear, again, y'all, there's no new program. When
Okay. So we had several months, I guess a couple weeks ago, the Biden administration, there were several reports about them discussing this. So it hadn't gone anywhere, but I thought we'd had enough questions that I thought I'd share that on there. Let me see if I see anything about things. So the link to that was as loud as I possibly could. Basically, it was saying that they've been discussing a possible parole in place program for the spouses of that are married to American citizens that are undocumented, but it hasn't gone anywhere and this doesn't exist yet. Something similar does exist for the military, but we'd had several questions where, we've had families say, hey, have you heard about this? So it was a discussion. I think the New York Times reported that they were in discussion, but it's not gone anywhere. It's not, done anything yet, but wanted to make sure we shared that. Okay, so let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Okay. So I'm going to share one other resource that we have on our website. A lot of you know about this. Some of you do not know about this. And I think it's a really important tool that we've talked a lot about agriculture. One of the challenges is to really know what's happening in agriculture in your areas. And so for those of you that have not heard of this, just hopefully this will be really good information for those of you that have heard of this. You can put in share if you think it's been valuable or not. One of the things that IDRC is going to do for all states, where we've done our states first, our member states first. I'm going to pick, somebody put their, I'll do South Carolina. So we have a tool that we call our Power BI. Let me go back and show you where I got this, because I probably did that too fast. On our website.
South Carolina is not updated yet.
Okay, so we'll do a different one. On our front page, hopefully I'm sharing this. Let's see, you can scroll down towards the bottom on where it says state Power BI listings under state resources for our member states. And so let's just take a look at, we looked at Arizona earlier, so let's look at Arizona. So what this is, and if my computer doesn't decide to sound like a rocket here in a second, let me close it.
And you have a little box showing covering.
Yeah, that's the Zoom, so I'll close that out. I mean, that's the chat. So let me know if you see anything that I need to be aware of. So we have a few minutes left before this session is over. We have a tool that we call it Power BI. We'll probably call it a better name here in a little bit, like maybe agricultural visualization tool or something. But one of the challenges, we talked about the ag census, but a lot of times people are not sure how to use that. What does that mean? So we have for all of our member states, we're working on taking the 2017 census to the 2022 census and updating this. And then once we finish with our member states, we'll do other states. But I want to give a quick overview of what this is and how this relates to what we're talking about today. So in Arizona, this very first front page shows me the top 15 counties that they have right there. They only have 15 counties in their state. So if I look at a different one, it will rank. Let me go back and just share with you a different one. Let's look at Georgia real quick. So here's Georgia. Georgia has more than just 15 counties. So they have their top 25 counties right here. So these are the top 25 counties that have by agriculture sales. So if I'm not one of those 25, I can go ahead and look at, my county and see, oh, it's 92 and be able to look at it. So this tool was created with the idea in mind that many of you have multiple counties, multiple areas that you're responsible to recruit in or that you oversee. And many of you may not really be tuned in to what's happening in agriculture in that particular county. So if we look at Tatnall, if I am the coordinator for Georgia for Tatnall and I want to know what is happening in my community, what I can do is use this tool to take a look at it. So I can understand the state. Georgia has a lot of livestock, 67% livestock, 33% crops. Every state is different. So when you're asking like increases or decreases, everybody's got different things going on. And so this tool will help you be able to see that. You can see which ones have the largest amount of farmland. Remember, some places may have more farmland, but that doesn't mean they could be totally mechanized. So it doesn't mean that it's that many more workers. But this gives you information to understand. So Tatnall has a possibility of at least 1,400 workers in the county that are farm workers. They're number one in the state. So I could look at a different county and compare it and see Atkinson is 53 in the state and there are 414. So I can kind of go through and look and compare, change my counties and see, ooh, this is not a big ag county. This Glenn County, only 25 workers. Now, there could be a bunch of processing because the ag census only shows field, crop, those kind of things. So want to make sure that you could take a look at that, and I'll show you in a little bit how you could look at that. But let's go back to Tatnall again. I could be totally butchering the name of that, but Tatnall. So over here, I can see operations who hire farm workers. There's 10 plus, there are 22 operations that hire more than 10 workers. There are 17 that hire between 5 and 9. If I'm the recruiter for that area, I want to know what those places are, and we'll share with how you can look at that. I want to understand what types of crops are happening. A lot of livestock, less crops in this area. Go on the next page, I can look at the types of operations that they have related to livestock. So if it says 999, that means there could be 1 or 2 producers, but the ag census promises to be anonymous. And so this is not going to be tons, but if I'm the only producer of hogs in my county and I have 154 pigs, they're not going to put it on there because they promise to be anonymous so that someone can't say, oh, this is what they have at their farm. So if you see 999, it's just smaller number of farms doing that, and the number is not exactly there. So but we could look at another county. Let's look at Bacon County. Nope, not a lot of pigs there. And see if anybody else has more hogs. This one has 261. Depending if we were to look at Iowa, for example, there could be 741,000 pigs in that particular area. But you can look, let's go back to Tatnall. Let's see.
Can I make a quick comment about the
Okay.
hogs?
Go ahead.
Yes, so if you see the 9.99 is that they did withhold the information of the inventory of hogs, but you can see that they did tell us that there's one operation that has more than 1,000 hogs. So you
Exactly.
already know there's more than 1,000 hogs, even though they didn't tell you the inventory.
Perfect. Yes, and thanks for pointing that out. So over here you can see there's 11,000 cows. There are some dairy cows, but again, it's going to be a small number of that. You can then see here they've got lots of egg production in this particular area. They've got 6 operations with egg productions. We've got a little bit of honeybees. Some areas that means there's workers, some areas that's just smaller. You've got some poultry operations here. You can see the number of chickens and broilers right here, the operations that have these different sizes. So I can start getting an idea of what's happening. This particular area has 6,379 acres of onions, 9,000 acres of vegetables. You can see these different types of vegetables here. We've got some melons, 469 acres of melons. And over here, it starts letting us see how many operations have over 1,000 acres, how many of them have between 750 and 999 acres. So you can be able to see those and how that breaks down. You can look at these different crops that they have just in that one county. So if I was going to compare a different county, I can then see, okay, wow, this county does not have a lot of, crops that are going on. I can compare and see, nope, this one does not either. So it gives you an idea of what you have. This one has a little bit of each and just a few operations, just 45 acres. So it gives you a quick way to be able to really look at it and see what's going on. I keep going back to Tatnall, just because it was the largest. So then we can see the next one looks at orchards and berries. They have tons of pecans in this area. So over 2,000 acres of pecans. We've got a little bit of apples, and then you can start seeing these different types of crops that they have. And the same thing for the number of, 23 operations have between 25 and 99 acres. Let you kind of see the sizes of those operations and kind of what you're looking for. Also has field crops, 7,671 acres of peanuts. And so I can really see these different types of field crops of what's going on. So as you can see, the idea is you could get a really quick picture of what's happening in your county. The next one shows horticulture. So your nursery out in the open, horticulture under protection. There's not a lot going on in this county on that, but that would be your greenhouse production. Some of you will have lots of Christmas trees. So this is really your guidance to really be able to understand and see. And then we start incorporating the maps that we have. So Melissa, if you can drop in the chat box, the ag portal information, every single state, IDRC state or not, we have done the work so that you have all of the public access information about farms that are already there. So we also do all the H2A maps, and we let you know who's in that particular area. So if you can see here, if you click on this, it's going to take you to the ag portal. And so Georgia, as you could then see all of these H2A listings for Georgia, you can see the full spreadsheets right there. So if you click on there, we do the work so that you can see each month. This was from April, for example, last time it was updated. Anything in yellow was new. And so then you can then see right there all of Georgia's information that we have right there. And the next page, go ahead.
There's a question about Massachusetts, but we haven't done Massachusetts yet because it's not an IDRC member, but we will do them after we finish with the member states. So that should be coming soon.
Yeah. So this takes a lot of effort to be able to get it for our member states. And so we were just going to do it for our member states, but then we kind of believe in the idea that, rising tide raises all boats, that we're all in this together. And knowing the numbers and the challenges of how the numbers have gone down in a lot of places, there are still plenty of farm workers. We have to be as effective as possible to find workers, and then hopefully be able to then provide quality services so that we're actually doing something for all this effort. Let me see if I
Your
see
box is back.
yeah, whenever I look at the chat.
Oh yeah, okay.
So we've got, okay, so we also have trailer parks. So that's from FEMA. They keep a list of those. We have all your farm labor contractors. If you are not working with your contractors, that is a huge opportunity right there that can be missed, because these guys are contracting with workers. So I can look at this county, and then maybe I have Bacon again. So Bacon there's not a lot of trailer parks in that particular area, but there are a decent amount of farm contractors. So I can, look and see the difference. We also have all of the GAP audited companies. So these are the companies for good agriculture practice. They are specifically fruit and vegetable ones. So Tatnall, I think I'm just giving it a new name. Tatnall is probably what it is. They don't have really any meat or poultry going on there. They don't have any of the GAP ones right there, but maybe a different county. Let's see, I'm trying to, that one does not have very many either. Let's see. So Crawford County has one meat slaughter place you can see right there. If you look on the next page, we have health centers. So I know this is not a particular ag, but it's migrant health centers. So if there is one, if nothing shows up, you don't have one of those. So our goal with IDRC is really to, really help states have those tools that you can find. You can look at your number of farm workers, you can look at that breakdown, and you can understand. And we really, really, really have to be organized as best as possible to help find those families and be able to, to get the kids signed up as quick as possible. So I'm going to stop record here. I think I am, if I can find it.